All right, so baseball returns today, MLB, and as you can see, the odds are on the screen, and we're going to get started with the first game, Boston and Chicago, Red Sox versus Cubs. And as you can see, the odds are on your screen. The Red Sox money line is at plus 114, minus 134 for Chicago. Spread is at plus 1.5. Underdog Red Sox at minus 184 cost. The Cubs spread or run line is at minus 1.5 at plus 155. That's possible. A lot of money could be made there off that plus 155. Over under is at 8.5. Plus 100 over, minus 122 under. And let's get going with the decode here. This 8.5. Okay. All right. Minus 134. We're going to focus on the negatives. Minus 134 money line for the Cubs and the minus 184. That is a very high cost for Boston. Now, the splits look like this. Boston betting percentage, money line, 42% betting, 58% betting on the Cubs. Money on the money line looks like this. 45% of the money going to Boston, 55% of the money going to Chicago. And this is based off global sportsbook averages. As you can see, is multiple different sports bookies and sports books combined. And they average it out based on and get these percentages. 38% of the betting going with Boston, 36% of the money going with Boston, 62% of the betting going with the Cubs, 64% of the money going with the Cubs. Over under total 8.5. 82% of the betting going with Boston, 79% of the money going with Boston on the total. Total's at 8.5. Under is getting 18% of the betting, 21% of the money is going with the under. Now, with Boston getting that minus 184 at 36% that is, minus 184 cost. That is a very high cost at 36% of the money. Of course, this is going to change throughout the day. Now, Cubs are not a sizable favorite in this one, obviously. They're only at minus 134. But if you were to go with them at this minus 134, that's a little bit risky. Especially with this, 64% of the money going with them. I don't see this happening, especially if that holds up over 50% at this plus 155. That is a high amount to pay out, especially at that over 60%. Boston looks like they could take this across the board. Over unders at minus 122. And that's only getting 21% of the money. The only way I see that under holding up at that minus 122 is if this percentage goes up. The betting percentage, 18%, and the 21% of the money goes up for the under. That's the only way I would fade the public in that one. All right. White Sox versus Pirates. Plus 138 for the White Sox. Minus 164 for the Pirates. Minus 156 for the White Sox at plus 1.5 run line. Minus 1.5 run line at plus 130 cost for the Pirates. Over-unders at 8.5. Minus 115 on the over. Minus 105 on the under. And as you know, the minus 105s hit more so than the minus 115s. And it is well over 60% traditionally. Minus 164. Going with looking at the Pirates. Pirates have definitely gotten better as the season has gone on. 81% of the money going with the Pirates on the money line. 79% of the money going with the Pirates on the betting on the money line. Spread looks like this. 79% going with, so Pittsburgh pretty much dominating across the board. 79% of the betting going with the Pirates and 89% of the money going with the Pirates on the run line. Total looks like this. Over under 8.5. 77% of the betting going over. 73% of the money going over. Now let's go back and check our values. Minus 115 over 8.5. That looks viable. But when the sharps go in, they're going to put heavy money on the under. They're going to put heavy money on the under, and that's going to somewhat even this out. It might even be 55-45 when it comes to the money, that is. I would fade the public only as it stands right now and go with that minus 105, but those costs could change as well. The cost could definitely change as well, obviously, as the day goes on. This is still early in the day. Minus 164, it is over that minus 150 threshold. Pittsburgh looks decent there. And it's minus 156. They're above that minus 150 threshold. White Sox looks decent on the run line at only 19% of the money. Now, if they are to get this, the White Sox, if they're to get this minus 156 is going to have to more than likely increase. Or Pittsburgh's run line is going to have to decrease in cost, that is, in cost. So that plus 130 probably going to have to turn into plus 122 or plus 120 or plus 118, 115, something like that. But let's go to the next one. San Diego versus Washington. Minus 158 for San Diego, plus 134 money line for Washington. Minus 1.5 spread for San Diego at plus 104 cost. Plus 1.5 run line at minus 125 cost. Not huge numbers in this game so far. Over under is at 8.5 at minus 118 cost for the over. Under is at 8.5 at minus 104 cost. All right, let's see. Where are we? Minus 118. Now, those hit about 50-50. It's literally about 51-50. 51% in favor of the minus 104. 49% in favor of the minus 118 traditionally when you have a total. But let's focus on this minus 158 and this money line for the Padres and minus 125 run line for the Nationals. Scroll down. All right, 87% of the money in favor of San Diego. I would join the public in that instance. 80% going with San Diego on the run line. I would actually join the public across the board in that one. But let's see where the over under is. 8.5. Going with the over at minus 118 cost. The only way I would go with the over is if it avoids that minus 115, minus 105. So if the cost for the over is minus 115 and the under is minus 105, I would go with the under. Any other instance, just as it is now, minus 118 for the over, I would join the public. I would join the public across the board in this one. All right, LA Angels versus the. Let's scroll down. All right, versus the Philadelphia Phillies. Plus 164 for the Angels, minus 196 for the Phillies. That is a very high money line for the Phillies. Plus 1.5 for the LA Angels at minus 125 cost. Minus 1.5 run line at plus 104 cost. Over under is at 8.5. Minus 115 going over. Minus 105 going under. Let's see where these totals go. Scroll down here. All right, 88% of the money and 83% of the betting odds in favor of the betting slips in favor of the Phillies. The run line is at 87% of the money in favor of the Phillies. 74% of the betting in favor of the Phillies. So people going with the Phillies across the board. And I'm going to agree so far. Over under is at 8.5. 75% going over. 86% of the money going over. And let's see what the cost is. That is a very high cost. Once again, the only way I would join the public in that one is if this cost by the opening pitch turns into minus, let's say minus one, anything but minus 115. Let's just put it that way. Well, yeah, let's go to San Francisco versus the Toronto Blue Jays. Plus 120 for San Francisco, minus 142 for Toronto. Plus 1.5 at minus 170 cost, going with the Giants. Blue Jays is at minus 1.5 at plus 140 for the run line for the Blue Jays. Over under is at 8.5. A lot of 8.5s today. Minus 114 going over. Minus 106 going under. Let's see. We're going to focus on that minus 170 San Francisco run line at 7%. They're only getting 7% of the money. When the sharps go in, well, the only way the sharps are going to pick them, of course, they're going to parlay it, but that 170 is more than likely going to have to get a little bit lower. But San Francisco could still take that one, and this plus 120 for them is at 21% of the money. 79% of the money going with Toronto, and this one people betting heavily on Toronto so far. And the only way I see Toronto winning this one is if they go above, if they get a little bit closer. They don't have to reach it, but get a little bit closer to that minus 150. If they do that, they're winning this game. If they do that, they're winning this game. And they're going to even this out. If Toronto wins the game, San Francisco could still get the run line, especially at that minus 170 cost. As long as that stays high, I would stay with San Francisco. They start dropping, especially, and they get more to betting. You see that cost drop, go with the Blue Jays across the board. Over under 8.5 again. I would go with the public and go with the over in that one. Let's go to the next one. Cincinnati versus New York Mets. Plus 136 for Cincinnati. Minus 162 for New York Mets. Plus 1.5 at minus 156 cost for the Reds. Minus 1.5 at plus 130 cost for the Mets. Over unders at 8. Minus 115 cost for the over. Minus 105 for the under. And let's see where the money is going. The Mets are above that minus 150 threshold at minus 162. And the Reds are above that minus 150 threshold at minus 156 on the run line. So let's see where we are here. 71%. 71% is going on the money, is going with the Mets. 85% of the money is going with the Mets. 85% of the money going with the Mets on the run line. That is 71% of the money going with the Mets on the money line. 15%. This 15% is going to have to increase for Cincinnati. I'm going to tell you that now. That's going to have to increase if they're going to get that run line, as well as their cost. I believe they're going to have to go above this if they're going to get this. If you see the cost go above this, wow, this 71% turns into more of about 55, 45, 58, 42, something like that percentage on the money line. Cincinnati could get this one across the board, but that's only if that happens that way. Over, under, I would, let's see, where's the money going in that one? Okay, money going heavily on the over. I would go with the under in that one. One of the lowest totals of the day. 19% of the money going there. Yeah, I would go with the under in that one. Let's go to the next one. Let me scroll down here. All right. Oakland versus Cleveland. All right, plus 118 for the Athletics. Cleveland gets minus 134. And minus 182 cost. That's a very high cost for a run line at plus 1.5. And plus, sorry about that, plus 150 at minus 105, 1.5 for the Cleveland Guardians. Over under is at 8.5. Over is finally getting the minus 105 treatment, and the under is getting the minus 115 treatment. The first one of the day so far. I would join the public and go with that over, that 83% at that minus 105 threshold, as long as it stays that way. 89% going with Cleveland on the run line at plus 150. They're looking to cash that out. Not likely. Oakland looks decent across the board. I would fade the public in that instance. I would look to go with, this is a game where people are going to bet heavily, looking to cash out that Cleveland run line, and plus that minus 134 is not a significant, but it is money for the bookies. It is money. but the Athletics look safe on that run line. Let's scroll down and go to the next one. All right, Kansas City versus Miami. Minus 120 for Kansas City on the money line, plus 102 for Miami currently on the money line, plus 138 at minus 1.5 for the plus 138 cost at minus 1.5 run line for the Royals, plus 1.5 at minus 166 cost for the Marlins. Over unders at 8, minus 106 cost going over, minus 114 going under. But let's focus on that minus 166 Miami Marlins run line cost. All right, 57% going with Kansas City on the money line, 61% going with them on the betting. 60% of the betting on the run line going with the Royals, 89% of the money going with the Royals. Not likely they're going to pay this out plus 138 and 89%, almost 90%. Over is getting 89% of the betting, 85% of the money. Now, that over 8, I would join the public and go over that 8 as long as the cost stays below the under. As long as the cost stays below the under. The minus 120 for the Kansas City Royals, plus 138, I would go with, let's see, 11% going with Miami right here. That is not very high, but that total is ridiculous. The only way I see Miami, I would like to go Miami across the board in this one. But that minus 120 is a little too enticing to forget about. To ignore, that is. 57% going with them on the money line, 89% going with them here. Yeah, I would stick to the public on the money line, and the only way I would go with Miami on the run line is if this 11% is going to have to increase, and it will. Kansas City's not going to stay at this 89% with only 60% of the betting slips, but Miami looks decent across the board in this game. They look decent across the board in this game, and watch how these odds teeter across that even line. Just watch how Miami teeters across that plus 100, minus 102, plus 102, minus 104, plus 106, something like that. Watch how that turns out. Just monitor that. If you see them fluctuate that with Miami, Miami's guaranteed to win this game. Guaranteed if they do that. All right, New York versus Atlanta. Minus 110 going with New York. Atlanta's getting minus 106. Minus 1.5 run line at plus 142 cost for the Yankees. Plus 1.5 and minus 172 cost for the Braves. Over 8.5 and minus 105 cost for the over. Under is getting 8.5 at minus 115 cost. Let's see where the money is going in this one. All right, as predicted, as I knew, 76% is going with the Yankees and 70% going with the Yankees on the run line, the money that is. They're looking to cash this plus 142 out. Not likely. I would go with Atlanta across the board. I would challenge the public and go with Atlanta across the board in this one. Over under is at 8.5. Let's see where the money is going in that one. Let's see, 91% of the betting is going with the over. 65% is going with the money. I would challenge that minus 105 in this one. I would fade it and go with the under at that minus 115. I would challenge this. This is one of those challenge games because you know people are going to bet heavily on the Yankees. I would challenge that and go with the under. All right, Baltimore Orioles versus Tampa Bay Rays, plus 106 for Baltimore Orioles. Tampa Bay Rays, minus 124. Plus 1.5 run line at minus 192 for the Orioles. Minus 1.5 at plus 158 cost for the Rays. Over unders at 9. Minus 106 cost for the over. Minus 114 for the under. Let's see. Hold on. All right, minus 124. That's a super high. Minus 192 for Baltimore. Let's see where the percentages are, though. All right, hold on. Let me scroll down. That's why I'm not seeing it. Gotta scroll down. All right. 39% in favor of Baltimore on the money line, 61% of the money in favor of Tampa Bay, 23% of Baltimore on the run, going with Baltimore on the run line, 77% of the money going with Tampa Bay on the run line. I would challenge, no, I wouldn't. Well, I would fade the public on the run line and go with that 23% Baltimore at minus 192 cost. That's too big to pass up on. Now, I wouldn't recommend betting that, but that's what I think is going to happen. All right, 61% in favor. I would join the public in that one and go with Tampa Bay at that 61%. They are getting minus 124 cost here. I don't see Baltimore teetering around that even line. That's why I'm confident going with Tampa Bay on the money line in this one. The over-under is at 9. 68% going over, 66% of the betting going over. I would join the public and go with the over in that one. All right, Detroit at Texas. Tigers at Rangers, minus 120 cost going with Detroit. Plus 102 going with Texas. Minus 1.5 cost, minus 1.5 run line at plus 132 cost. Plus 1.5 run line at minus 160 cost for the Rangers. Over-unders at 8.5. Minus 115 going over, minus 105 going under. And let's see what's going on with this minus 160 with Texas. All right, 69% of the money line as well as the betting slips. 69% across the board going with the Tigers. 76 and 78%. 78% of the money going with the Tigers. So people not putting heavy money on Texas at home. Over-unders at 8.5. 89% going of the betting going over. 87% of the money going over. All right, minus 105 cost for the over, minus 105. I would fade that public and go with the under on that total. And let's see. I would challenge them. I would go with Texas across the board at home. In sports, you need to be aware of betting heavy home favorites. Obviously, this isn't the case for this game. They're a dog in this game. And they're quite not a significant dog, but they are a dog. And at minus 160 cost, they're above that minus 150 threshold. Watch how they teeter. Watch how they teeter with that Texas money line. Just watch what they do with that. Just keep that in mind. If you definitely see that happening, or if Texas odds go up, let's say it goes up to plus 110, and Baltimore goes to Detroit goes to minus 130, then this goes down. This 31% turns into 25%. I would guarantee you Texas would win that game in that instance. I would still go with Texas across the board in this one and go with that under at minus 105, fading the public in that one. Let's go to the next one. All right, let me scroll back up. Okay, yeah, we're at the tail end here. Hold on. Sorry about that. All right, Minnesota, minus 166 money line, plus 140 for the Rockies, minus 110 cost for the Minnesota, plus 1.5 and minus 110 cost for the Rockies. Over under at 10.5, minus 120 cost going over. Under is getting minus 102. When I see such high totals, I'm going to challenge that over, especially at that higher cost too. So I would go with the over, not even seeing the splits in this one. Minus 166 for the cost for the Twins on the money line. Let's look into that. 96% going with them in that one. I would join the public across the board in that game. But first game back from the All-Star break. People not having confidence in Colorado. Colorado could be a sneaky pick in this one. They could be a sneaky pick in this one. And notice this minus 110 even on the run line. You rarely see that in baseball. Colorado could be a sneaky pick in this one. Watch if they go to this plus 145, plus 150 and higher. I would go with Colorado across the board, and only in that instance. They're going to have to increase a little bit despite being such low in the betting splits and the money. They're going to have to go higher. But let's go with St. Louis versus Arizona. Plus 110 for St. Louis, minus 130 for Arizona. Plus 1.5 for St. Louis at minus 200 cost. Minus 1.5 at plus 164 cost for Arizona. Over unders at 8.5. Minus 122 cost for the over. Plus 100 cost for the under. Let's see where the money is going. Highest of the day, minus 200 here. Minus 200 here. Let's see. All right, 76% in favor of St. Louis on the money line, 89% in favor of Arizona on the run line. And yeah, they're not paying that out. They're not paying that out. I would go with St. Louis across the board only as it looks right now. St. Louis across the board only as it looks right now. 76% in favor of St. Louis here. I would go with St. Louis across the board, over under 8.5. I would join the public and go with that over. Now, Milwaukee versus LA Dodgers. Plus 158 and minus 188 for the Dodgers. Plus 158 for the Brewers at minus 188 cost for the Dodgers. The other two are locked currently. They're probably just updating the odds as we speak. But we're going to just focus on the money line. 73% of the money going with the Dodgers, 76% going with the Dodgers here. I would join the public and go with the Dodgers, only as it currently stands. But Astros are at plus 110, minus 130 cost for Seattle. Spread run line looks like this: plus 1.5 run line at minus 192 cost, minus 1.5 at plus 158 cost. Over unders at 7.5, minus 105 cost for the over. Unders getting minus 115. Let's see where the money is going in that one. Minus 192 for Houston is getting 68%. I would join the public in that one. 65% of the betting, the money, going with Seattle on the money line. Let's see, hold on. Where is that? They are at minus 130. The Mariners, 65%. This is also going to be one of those games. I would go with Houston across the board, and I would join the public and go with that. No, I would fade the public and go with that under 7.5. I would challenge it. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Join the Patreon. Link is in the description and in the video. Pray every day. I've been Scott. Good to be back to sports and MLB. But yeah, see y'all in the next video.